Hi, Alex. Thanks very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for your time today. Before we get into any questions, I can't help but notice that the tactics boards you've got behind you, and they look really cool. Can you tell us a bit about them?
I guess they've been the backdrop to every call that I've had now for the last kind of 18 months as we've been in lockdown. But it was actually a gift from my wife. Actually, they are the three goals from the Champions League to final in 2005 between AC Milan and Liverpool. So it's basically a visual representation of every goal. Yeah.
That's fantastic. You didn't mention you're a Liverpool supporter. I could have
Yeah.
worn my Liverpool top, which I have done for a huddle in the past.
Dig it out from the 80s. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, hopefully a good season ahead for Liverpool. But obviously today we're here to talk about yourself and Pronet Gaming. And to start off with, it'd be, I think a nice intro would be just if you kind of walked us through your kind of history in the industry and how you got involved in gaming to start off with.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always think that gaming is an industry that finds you as opposed to you finding gaming. I think like a lot of people just seem to sort of come across it accidentally, but once they're in, they get the bug, and it's very, very difficult to leave. I mean, my own background, I've got a degree in biochemistry, which is not very useful for gaming. It's good for dinner parties. So I then went into after my degree, I went into sports broadcasting, working out of BT Tower, and then got involved in that side of the industry, and then eventually going through to the Press Association when I was head of sales in terms of sports data. So they were naturally starting to deal with the provision of sports data and sports news to some of the main online gaming sites in the UK at the time. I then moved to another telecoms company, and then one day I got a call from a recruiter with regards to a role at Sporting Bet, which was a marketing role, a marketing and VIP role in their UK sportsbook team. So that was my first foray into gaming. For the first couple of weeks, it was just a bombardment of everything, marketing, data. It was quite intimidating. But once you kind of get your head around it, then I think, most people find that it's the most invigorating industry to be involved in, just because it gives you everything, essentially. So I stayed at Sporting Bet, which then evolved into GVC for around 5 years, running various businesses from them, starting off with the UK, then moving on to some of the international markets, which has now really been my specialty, I would say, for the last sort of 5 or 6 years. After that time at GVC, I was ready for a bigger challenge. So I went over to Offside Gaming, where I took on a managing director role, helping to improve the quality of their sites, but from the point of view of a B2B platform provider. I then had a stint running a site called Smart Live Casino in the UK, which was probably fair to say quite a difficult experience given the shareholders involved, but one that I certainly learned a hell of a lot from. I then had a further 3 years at William Hill, where I was initially director of international. And then after 2 years, I moved on into their corporate development department, where I was helping to take them into some of these newer jurisdictions like Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and so on and so forth. So that was a very, very good experience. But I think that when I look back to the time when I was CEO of Smart Live Casino, I think once you've experienced doing it yourself from the top, it's very, very difficult in some respects to go back to working again in a big corporate. So, I mean, whilst I had 3 great years at William Hill, it's probably fair to say that I was just waiting really for the next opportunity to arise. Obviously, it had to be the right opportunity, and that's when I heard of the role with Pronet Gaming. And once I understood what their aspirations were with regards to expanding the portfolio of the markets, it was absolutely the role that I was always waiting for.
Sure, a lot of interesting points there, and I definitely take your point about gaming kind of finding you. That's something I can relate to, and a few people I've interviewed have said the same. And something else people have said, let me know if you agree with this, is gaming finds you, but once you enter the industry, more often than not, it can be an industry for life. It's very difficult to leave it. Because,
Really
like
agree.
you say, it offers you quite a lot.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. You talked about your time at William Hill, and I definitely take your point about you're waiting for a kind of a next big opportunity in terms of leadership. But how useful or beneficial was working kind of in the emerging markets and new territories at William Hill? Because as we understand at the moment, that has a lot to do with what Pronet is about at the moment and aiming for.
Yeah, so I mean, that experience, I got that from my time at Sporting Bet. They were quite pushy with regards to the international markets that they were going in, and likewise when GVC came in, with what Kenny had done, they were very much pushing the way really into these new markets. So I guess the remit for me at William Hill initially as director of international was to run their regulated businesses in Italy and Spain, which of course come with their own challenges, a lot of advertising restrictions, a lot of technical restrictions, which actually can withhold the product. And when you've got a business which is as big as William Hill, through no fault of their own, it can be quite difficult sometimes to be as agile as you maybe need to be in some of those regulated markets. So I started to maybe take advantage of their businesses in the other markets that they have, the other kind of gray markets like Japan, for example. And then as I moved into corporate development, it became obvious to me that I think, when you add to their acquisition of Mr. Green, there was clearly an appetite to go into new markets which were either on the point of regulation or just regulated already, but maybe there were markets that were very unfamiliar to William Hill. Traditionally, their sort of UK retail business and online business was always their bedrock, but I think they did start to have aspirations to go further afield. So that's what I did for them. So I started off the license application into Buenos Aires province, for example, going over there, making partnerships, stuff that maybe William Hill wasn't quite used to. So that was quite an exciting role for me. And I worked under Crispin Niebuhr at William Hill. I learned a lot from him, I would say, in terms of general M&A modus operandi, almost to sort of understand how you judge the value of a company and which KPIs you look for. And I'm using that skill set today at Pronet when I'm considering, not just new clients for Pronet, but also the M&A side of it. But as for Pronet's focus, I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that there was a perception previously, maybe before I joined, that it was like the emerging market specialist. And I have to say that's something that I'm keen for us to get away from, because we are operating in regulated markets. There's many markets in Africa, for example, which are regulated. Latin America is a region which is regulating rapidly, Colombia being the first, followed by some of the provinces in Argentina, and then down to the likes of Peru and Brazil, which are going to be regulating very soon. Mexico is a regulated market. And equally, there's movements within Asia now as well, as I'm sure you've heard, the likes of Vietnam and Cambodia moving towards regulation. So I think it's maybe a sort of easy perception to have that we're like the emerging markets specialist. I think that can create a certain perception, but then again, our products actually that we've developed is relevant for these newly regulated markets.
So I suppose in that bid to maybe change that perception, what do you perhaps have to do to get that message, I guess, more out there about the regulated markets?
Well, I think that's been the job really from the start. The way that I always pitched Pronet Gaming to the new employees, because if you remember, the business was already pre-existing before I joined. It was already a very, very successful business with over 45 clients, with a very, very healthy operating profit, albeit it was more or less focused on one niche market. And my pitch almost to the new potential employees was, it's almost like the biggest B2B provider that you've not heard of yet. So that was my job, to really get the Pronet name out there. And I would argue that, the level of marketing that we now have is excellent. Something that I'm very, very proud of with what we do across, LinkedIn, general digital advertising. The stand that we had at ICE in February 2020, that was a real statement. It was a huge success for us, and that's actually what paved the way to the growth that we saw during 2020. We signed over 21 new customers between June and December 2020. So I think really it's about getting Pronet onto the, what I would call the top table, if you like, of B2B platform providers, and that's been the work in progress really over the last 18 months for me. Starting from scratch effectively with regards to marketing.
Yeah.
And now, I think that's realistic. In the recent EGR awards, we were highly commended in second place to Canby when it came to the sportsbook services provider. So, I mean, for us to get there so quickly, ahead of so many other B2B platform providers, shows really what we've done in the market, not just in terms of the product, but what we've done with regards to brand perception and marketing. And for me, it just feels pretty inevitable. It's a matter of time before we start to win these awards, and that will come, with us having now won some of the major tier 1 deals in these new emerging markets.
So given kind of the achievements you've set out and the kind of, I guess, the things you're aiming for, how would you kind of sum up your time as CEO at Pronet so far?
Well, hopefully pretty successful, I would hope. Well, the shareholders seem happy, so that's the most important thing. No, look, I mean, when I set about starting off Pronet in the UK, in terms of a commercial HQ, it was always my aim to build the company that I always wanted to work for. So, I mean, I would say in terms of the quality of the team that I have at my disposal, I couldn't be prouder. And I guess I have to take some credit for that, because I was the one that recruited them in the first place. But it's a good team, and everyone who is there wants to be there. That's one of the key criteria. And believe me, we've had interviews with many, many good candidates for various roles, but their desire hasn't been quite right, or they've been weighing up offers, from other companies. We don't really want that. We want people who buy into what we want to achieve, and what our goals and objectives are for the next 5 years. So look, as a CEO, my remit is obviously to drive growth. So we've seen that. So in 2020, we drove 18% growth in relation to 2019. And this year, in 2021, I think that we'll be disappointed if we're not seeing probably 25 to 30% growth in the business. And that comes just down to improving the product. So therefore, the customers that we already have more ability to make more money, and therefore we do, because of how we charge our clients. And secondly, with the new clients that we're bringing on board, as they gradually grow and get used to the new product that they have, and they're able to exploit that across a whole number of markets, I think that growth will continue. So I think we're now almost at the crossroads now, where we are in a position to be winning what I would call the tier 1 deals. And perhaps one of the areas where we can specialize in is perhaps with the tier 1s, dare I say it, like the ones like William Hill, for example, who've been very, very active in the heavily regulated European markets, but now wish to get in on the action that's happening in these other ones like Africa and like LATAM. So many of our discussions of late have been around, taking these big tier 1 operators into these new markets, whereby the product that they have, they're never going to be agile enough to be able to adapt it. So therefore, it makes sense to work with someone like ourselves who can help them.
And on that point, as a CEO, if there was, and this might put you on the spot a little bit, if there was one thing that absolutely anything in the world for Pronet, but you can only choose one kind of wish, what would it be? And I apologize, that may put you on the spot.
No, it's a good question. A fair question as well. If there's one thing that I would like for Pronet, well, you know, it's our job really to be at the forefront of product development, okay, on behalf of our clients, to sort of be pushing the boundaries. Now, obviously, since the pandemic, the challenge has actually been on the recruitment of new developers. You know, if you think about it, over the pandemic, you know, every business that you can think of across every sector has all gone online. So therefore, the global demand for developers has really gone up. You know, and it is now much more difficult to recruit developers in particular, which is why, you know, we've had to up our game really with regards to the marketing and the recruitment and the benefits that we offer to kind of bring people in. So if I had one wish, it would just be to magically have, you know, an additional 500 developers now, right, to be able to sort of make sure that our platform is always pushing at the very forefront of new technologies. And not that we're actually behind the curve now, but you're effectively behind the curve if you're not constantly moving on. So that's what I would like. It will happen. We will bring the people in that we need in terms of developers, but you know, as I'm sure every other operator and B2B provider will attest, it's just not fast enough, you know, for my liking, because of the increased competition. It's a very long answer to your question, but a very honest one nonetheless.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair answer. You've pinpointed something there that actually could lead on to, I mean, my next couple of questions. One is going to be about the competition you mentioned, but I was going to ask, excuse me, what are the major challenges you face in the industry right now? And I think you've alluded to one there in terms of the development side, but, you know, is that your biggest challenge? Or, you know, what are the other things? I can imagine regulation as well, that kind of thing.
It can be, but, you know, don't forget, for a B2B platform provider, the regulation challenge is almost indirect in some respects. So, for example, for us to be able to take clients into regulated markets, we ourselves, you know, do not always need to have a B2B license from that jurisdiction. It's actually, the onus is on the B2C operator. Mm-hmm. To ensure that their platform is compliant with the local regulations. So, for example, if they're using us, then naturally we have to be compliant, but we don't have to go through a license application per se in every eventuality. I think it more comes down to the certifications from the likes of GLI and BMM. So yeah, I mean, I think what we're finding, and I guess this is how we respond to the challenges that the B2C operators are facing, is when they're going into these new emerging markets, which is now starting to regulate across Africa, LATAM, and Asia, they don't have the expertise to do it. You know, if it's in a European market, they know what to do in terms of platform, in terms of payments, in terms of team and marketing, and so on and so forth. Some of these markets that they know they need to go into can be quite alien to them. So what we're finding is we're coming under more pressure now, not just to provide the platform, but to provide the managed solution, which includes the marketing, so like the affiliate marketing, any above the line that may or not be possible, even advising clients on local law firms and how to create new companies. So we have been taking very much of a consultative approach with these new clients. So actually, I mean, in certain markets, because of the team that I have, you know, we all have our specialisms, I would say, in terms of specific knowledge about a certain market. And very often it's about knowing who to pick the phone up to get something done. So so that is a challenge for us, really, to sort of keep abreast of that and make sure that we can support our clients into what is effectively a new market entry for them in these jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, sure. Don't know why I'm losing my voice, but we go back.
It's okay, no problem.
As I mentioned, the next question, and this is a point you mentioned as well, is competition, which I guess it is a form of challenge, sort of in any industry really. How does Pronet stand out with such competition in sports betting, and also to a point of, if a company says we are the market leader in this field, you may well be, or any company may well be, but there'll be a number of companies making similar claims, and it's like there's a lot of good companies. It's a competitive industry, so how exactly do you stand out? And as I say, especially sports betting now globally, US, certain markets. I mean, in the UK, it's always been very saturated. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we specifically targeted the regulated markets across Africa and Latin and Asia for that reason. The UK market is very saturated, and I think with any market where there's a significant tax burden, it is difficult for companies to use a third-party provider. It is just it's a harder business case to look through when you're having to consider an extra percentage of your GGR to pay a platform provider. So that's why I think that our strength is actually when it comes to these other markets, which are obviously regulated in quite a different way, and maybe where the marketing spend doesn't need to be quite so big. If you look at like the European markets, most tier one firms are spending between sort of 15 and 20% of their marketing of their NGR on marketing spend. It's significant. So when you add another percentage there for the platform, and you add another percentage there for the tax, it becomes quite tight. So I mean, yeah, in those newer markets, in terms of how we compete, I think it's probably fair to say that with Africa, we've in many respects we've been quite surprised, I have to say, by how quickly we were able to gain a very strong foothold over there. We worked hard on the product, very much for that market, so with some very specific features which are going to be applicable to end users across Africa, so across payments and how they use retail to place bets and how they interact between online and retail. I think that's how we sort of tend to compete there. But I think, like in some respects, we've seen the competition go up, but also seen it go down. Obviously with SB Tech, of course, now being involved with DraftKings, that's kind of left a void in the market, which many platform providers will be looking to fill. Obviously, BTO was acquired by Aspire Global, into one bigger piece. So there obviously has been a bit of consolidation there, and I think that with the aspirations into the US market, that in many respects has actually played in our favor, because what we're seeing is it's very difficult for either B2C operators or B2B operators to be effective in both at the same time. It almost feels like people are going with all their eggs in one basket. So people are going, with a big foray into the US. It's making it more difficult for them to continue to be cutting edge in the other markets, which I think is where we can compete very effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for all the analysis and answers so far. I've got kind of one final question really for you, and it's quite an open-ended one. And
sure.
You would have talked about kind of goals and targets and ambitions already, but to kind of conclude, what are your kind of goals for Pronet moving forward? Have you got any specific ones as we sort of head into 2022? And also as a CEO and as an executive yourself on a personal
note? Well, in terms of Pronet itself, the goal is of course to grow the business, but also to be able to get to the point where we are like the number one provider across the markets that we're going into. So that's Africa, LATAM, and Asia. So we want to be known to have like the number one product. I think that there are certain scenarios in the African market, for example, where we can legitimately claim to be the number one, but I think that has to be backed up, doesn't it, with the awards ultimately. And I think that with us being a relatively new entrant into the B2B industry, I think I just want to see us actually solidify our position there in respect of, you know, getting the kind of industry recognition, probably, you know, how maybe some of the other brands have been doing so far. So that would be my kind of honest aspiration. So things are going really, really well now.
Mm-hmm.
We've already completely changed the perception of the brand. I just want to see us solidify that. So, you know, for every single awards, when there's, you know, 10 nominees, I want to see us in the top 3, you know, for everyone that we're going for. So that would be an aspiration. As a CEO, I think the one thing that I want to make sure that we maintain, because don't forget, as we grew the team in London, at the beginning, because there's obviously a smaller number of staff, it's very much a kind of like family environment. You know, everyone's so close. Everyone's like based, you know, in a small office, you know, working very, very closely, you know, particularly in the build up to our first ice. But we've obviously grown considerably since then. So my challenge there, and my aim really, is to make sure that we maintain that culture. And it's a difficult thing as you get bigger, because you can't spend time with everyone. So that puts down a challenge to me to sort of try to maintain that. And the way that I always see ourselves is we have the robustness of a big corporate because of the operating profit that we drive, but we have the agility of a startup. And it's that almost startup culture that I want to maintain, but it's a tough ask, really. And so that's my goal, I would say, to sort of try and maintain that, and to get one of these awards for Employer of the Year. That would make me very happy if we were to win that.
Well, Alex, thanks very much for your time. And I've just realized that you've got your tactics board, but I can salute you with a Liverpool mug. So I should have.
You didn't know that before, did you?
Yeah, it's been sitting right in front of me. I should have brought that out.
Yeah.
The interview.
It looks well worn as well, might I say?
Yes. Well, yeah. You've got Gerard here. I don't think you can. You can
just
about
see him out. Yeah.
But yeah, you'll never walk alone. But thanks very much for your time.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great to speak with you. Thank you.
Bye.